Welcome to Chapter 14. We're just going to be working on 4.1 in Chapter 14, so calculating parenteral dosages in solution. Alright, so we're looking at injections. And injections are mixtures that contain the drug dissolved in an appropriate liquid. The dosage or solution strength on an injectable medication label indicates the amount of the drug contained within a volume of the solution. Dosage strength may be expressed in milligrams per milliliter, as a percent, or as a ratio. And this can be found on page 335. Alright, so some vocabulary we're going to be looking at. So intravenous is going to be, or an IV, which means into a vein. So this is an injection that you would put into a vein. This is the fastest. So this is fastest. Absorption rate. And then we have intramuscular, which is into a muscle. Okay, and this is the absorption rate varies 10 minutes or longer. Oh, sorry, and for intravenous, the absorption rate of 30 to 60 seconds. Subcutaneous is under the skin. Absorption rate is about 15 minutes or longer. And then intradermal is going to be between the layers of skin. Now let's look at how to select the proper syringe when you're going to be giving an injection. This is on page 336 of your textbook. So if the amount of injection to administer is 1 milliliter or more, you're going to round the amount to the tenths. 10 tenths, and use a standard 3 milliliter syringe, which is the image down here below. If the amount of the injection to administer is less than 1 milliliter, so less than, but it's greater than or equal to 0.5 milliliters, so but greater than or equal to 0.5 milliliters and calculates evenly to the tenths place, okay? You're going to use a 1 milliliter, to the tenths place. Use a 1 milliliter tuberculin syringe or a standard 3 milliliter syringe. Alright, so this would be the 1 milliliter tuberculin, and this would be, once again, the standard 3 milliliter. And you know that by the end base amount here is a 1, and the end base amount here is 3. Lastly, if the amount of the injection to administer is less than 1 milliliter, round to the hundredths and use a tuberculin syringe. For amounts that are less than, ran out of room there, 0.5 milliliters, use a tuberculin syringe, if available. Alright. Okay, so basically, though, these smaller amounts, you're going to be using the tuberculin syringe. In those that are on the larger side, you're going to be using the 3 milliliter syringe. Alright, so for example 1, we're going to choose the correct syringe to use based off of the calculated amount to administer. Alright, so the amount to administer for A is 2.4 milliliters. So let's write it down. Let's take a look at this number. Well, 2.4 is greater than 1 milliliter. Alright, so what does this mean for us? If it's greater than 1 milliliter, we're going to round to the tenths and use a standard 3 milliliter syringe. Alright, so that means we're going to be using a standard syringe. And it is already in the tenths place, so we don't need to round. Now let's look at B. Take a moment, pause the video, and see which one you think we're going to end up using. Oh, real quick on that, I do want to write out what standard. Standard 3 milliliter syringe, just to be clear. So for B, the amount to administer is 0.6 milliliters. Since this is greater than 0.5, so 0.6 is greater than 0.5, and it also calculates evenly to the tenths place, we're going to use either a 1 milliliter tuberculin syringe or a 3 milliliter syringe. Okay, so either one of those options would work. And lastly, for C, the amount to administer is 0.34 milliliters. All right, so 0.34 is less than 1. And so we can use a 1 milliliter, we can use a 1 milliliter tuberculin syringe, or, so 1 milliliter tuberculin, or we could go ahead and use a 0.5 milliliter tuberculin. All right, so let's go ahead and keep moving on. Once again, though, if reading these, this is the 0.5 tuberculin. This one right here is the it's milliliters, sorry. Well, that should be, let me just go ahead and erase that, make it look better. 0.5 milliliter tuberculin. And this one is the 1 milliliter tuberculin. And this is the standard 3 milliliters. Alright, so moving on. Next page. So, how to correctly round the amount of an injection to administer. And note, this is on page 337 of your textbook. So, for the first thing, round volumes greater than 1 milliliter to the nearest tenth, because the 3 milliliter syringe is calibrated in tenths. Alright, so if they're bigger than 1, you're going to round off to the tenths. Number 2, round volumes less than 1 milliliter to the nearest hundredth, because tuberculin syringes are calibrated in hundredths. Alright, so let's take a look at example 2. Correctly round the calculated administration amount. Alright, so we have the administration for part A is 1.66 milliliters. Alright, so 1.66, is this greater than or less than 1? Well, this is greater than 1, which means we're going to go with option 1, which is to round to the nearest tenth. Alright, so the nearest tenth is going to be 1.7 milliliters, because we will be using the standard 3 milliliter syringe. And the 3 milliliter syringes are marked in tenths. Okay, try B by yourself, pause the video, give it a go. Alright, so for B, let's see. This amount, 0.532, is going to be less than 1, which means we're going to be using a tuberculin syringe. Alright, and because tuberculin syringes are calibrated in terms of hundredths, we're going to go ahead and round this to the hundredths place. Alright, so looking at the hundredths, the value to the right is smaller than 5, so we're going to go ahead and keep it at 0.53 milliliters. And there we go for rounding. Okay, so I talked to the vet program about the appropriate amounts to inject for animals, because the textbook we have is not specifically for animals, which is kind of interesting, but that's the textbook that has been picked for this course. So I'm just going to read a few of these pieces, but go ahead, please read this in your free time, because this was from the WCC vet program, a bit of information on injections to give to animals and the appropriate amounts. So, for small companion animals, the amount of fluid given via the subcutaneous route, okay, so subcutaneous, what is subcutaneous, big word, that means under the skin. So due to the fact that animals skin can kind of be lifted up more than humans, they can put up to 20 milliliters in fluid in one site. For large animals, they do not normally give subcutaneous fluids, but other medicines. For intramuscular injections, so IM, large animals can receive approximately 10 to 15 milliliters per site. And small animals, let's see, what can it be? The volumes can be very small, 0.1 milliliters to 5.1 milliliters, depending on the size of the cat or the dog or the dose. So that was a very quick overview. That's something you'll be learning more in your other classes, but just something to give you a heads up. For example 3, given the administration amount and the animal size, determine how to administer the injection. Alright, so we're told to administer 5 milliliters intramuscular for a cat. So reading this list above, we know for a cat, we can have 1 milliliter to 5 milliliters in one place. But we can't fit 5 milliliters into a syringe, so we're going to go ahead and use 1 3 milliliter standard syringe. Oops, wrong one. And then to make it fully to 5 milliliters, we have 2 milliliters and another standard syringe. And that can be administered in the same area, but normally if you split your syringe into 2 separate amounts, you'd probably put them in separate areas. Alright, moving on. So for this textbook, it talks about human injections. So we're going to go ahead and work with the human injections. The idea is the same. Alright, so for adults, injections anywhere except for the arm, you would use up to 3 milliliters in one site. That means you wouldn't put 4 milliliters in the same site. If you needed to add another milliliter, you'd have to do it in a different site. For the adult arm, it's 1 milliliter. For a child 6 to 12 years old, you can put up to 2 milliliters. For a child 0 to 5, up to 1 milliliter. And for a premature infant, it's 0.5 milliliters. Any subcutaneous injections, the max is 1 milliliter. So do not exceed any of these amounts in those particular sites. We're going to go ahead and work on example 4 for finding the amount to administer. So our instructions are: find the amount to administer and select the proper syringe. So find A and syringe to use. So we have ordered diazepam, 75 milligrams, intramuscular now. And the dosage strength is going to be 5 milligrams per milliliter. And our patient is a 175-pound, 45-year-old male. Alright, so the dosage ordered and the dose on hand are already expressed in the same units. Okay, so milligrams, same units, so we don't have to calculate anything different there. So now what we're just going to do is calculate the amount to administer. So we'll set up the proportion H over Q equals D over A. And note my H value is going to be 5 milligrams. Our Q value, or unit value, is 1 milliliter. Our dosage is what we had, 7.5 milligrams, and the amount to administer, we're going to find that. So plugging that in, we have, 5 milligrams over 1 milliliter equal to 7.5 milligrams over A. Okay, we can cross multiply to solve, and we'll get 5 milligrams times administration, and then 7.5 milligrams times 1 milliliter. We can go ahead and cancel the milligram units. And what are we left with? Well, we're left with 5 times A equals 7.5 milliliters. We can go ahead and divide out by 5 to get the amount to administer by itself. And we are left with A equals 1.5 milliliters. Alright, so we know a standard ml syringe, or standard milliliter syringe should be used since this is greater than 1. So here we go. So since 1.5 is greater than 1, we will use a 3 milliliter syringe. And we don't need to round because it's already in the tens place. And we can give this as a single injection because the person is an adult, and according to our rules for adults, oops, I backed up on it too fast. Rule for adults, 3 milliliters is the largest, and we only have 1.5 milliliters, so we can use a single injection. So since 1.5 is less than 3, we can use a single injection. All right, moving on. So same thing. The instructions are find the amount to administer, so find A, and the proper syringe. All right, so before we start, we always want to make sure the units are the same. But when I look, I notice I have 800 micrograms and 2 milligrams. So I need to find the correct dosage in terms of the dose that I have on hand, which is milligrams. So for A, we're going to have to determine the conversion factor, which is 1 milligram equals 1,000 micrograms. All right, so using dimensional analysis, we know that the amount to administer, A milliliters, is going to equal, and we'll put our conversion factor down, 1 microgram over 1,000, 1 milligram over 1,000 micrograms. Then we're going to multiply that by the dosage unit over the dosage on hand. So the dosage unit is going to be Q over the dose on hand, which is H. And then we're going to multiply that by the dosage ordered, which is D. So let me fill that in. A milliliters equals 1 microgram over 1,000. There's 1 milligram over 1,000 micrograms times. So the dosage unit is 1 milliliter all over the dose on hand, which is 2 micrograms, or milligrams, times the dose ordered. So many dose words here. So the dosage ordered, which is 800 micrograms. I said it right that time. And then we can just put that over 1. All right, then we can go ahead and cancel out some of our units. So the milligrams will cancel, and the micrograms will cancel. And then let's multiply across. We have A milliliters equals 1 milliliter times 800 all over 1,000 times 2. And then multiplying all that out, A milliliters, let's just, actually first we can go ahead and do 800 over 2,000 milliliters, which will end up equaling 0.4 milliliters. All right. So now, let's think about it. What kind of a syringe should be used? Well, since this is less than 1, we're going to use a tuberculin, and it's even less than 0.5. So we can go ahead and use either a 1. So we can, let's just do this. So 0.4 is less than 0.5. Then we can use either a 1 milliliter or 0.5 milliliter tuberculin syringe. All right, and then we need to decide how much we can give as an injection. So this is for a 5-year-old boy. So what can we give to children under of the age of 5? Let's go back and check our chart. The chart says children 0 to 5 years old can have 1 milliliter. All right, so since we found our answer was 0.4, so since 0.4 is less than 1, we can give this as a single injection. All right, moving on to our last example. So now we're going to go back to using the formula method. Once again, you can choose which method you wish to solve with. I'm just going to go ahead and keep using the three methods to show you the options for solving. All right, so for example 6, we have ordered lorazepam 800 micrograms intramuscular now. Dosage strength is 2 milligrams per milliliter. And the patient is an 85-pound, 12-year-old female. All right, so first things first. The dose on hand is in milligrams and the order is in micrograms. So those are not set up correctly yet. Which means we need to find the desired dose in milligrams. So first step, we need to find D. So find D in milligrams, which means we're going to be going from micrograms to milligrams. All right, so to do that, we can set up a proportion. Okay, so recall what we already used, milligrams, 1,000 micrograms. So setting up my proportion to find D, I know that 1 milligram is equal to 1,000 micrograms. We set that equal to what we're trying to convert. So we have 800 micrograms, and D, my dosage I'm trying to find. Okay, we can go ahead and cross multiply. And we get 800 micrograms times 1 milligram equals D times 1,000 micrograms. We can cancel the microgram units. And then let's also divide by 1,000 in the same step. And we get 800 divided by 1,000 milligrams equals D. Simplifying this out, we end up with 0.8 milligrams is the dosage we want. All right, so let's go ahead and find the amount to administer. So second, find A. And we're going to use the formula we have, which is going to be dose divided by amount on hand times the unit is equal to our administration amount. So real quick, the dose we have is 0.8 milligrams. Amount on hand is 2 milligrams. And the unit is per 1 milliliter, so 1 ml. All right, filling this in, we have 0.8 milligrams divided by 2 milligrams times 1 milliliter. And we can put that over 1 equals the amount we want to administer. Okay, so the milligrams will cancel, and then I'm left with 0.8 divided by 2 milliliters equals A. And calculating that out, we get 0.4 milliliters equals A. Okay, so now which syringe should we use? Well, so 0.4 is less than 0.5, which means we could use well, that's a double so. We can use either the 1 milliliter or 0.5 milliliter tuberculin syringe. All right, and then can we give the volume dose as a single injection? Well, this is a 12-year-old female. So let's go ahead and check our chart. How much can we give a 12-year-old female in a single injection? 12-year-old female, the max is 2 milliliters. So that is definitely below the max amount. So we can give it in as a single injection. Since 0.4 is less than 2, and remember 2 is the max injection, we can give the amount in a single injection. Right, and that is it. Please email me if you have any questions with the homework.